Welcome back to the garden. We're in my vegetable garden this time, and it's mostly planted and it's looking really, really good. But the spring crops are finished and the deer did get some things, but I've got it cleaned up and it's thoroughly weeded. So we're gonna have a look and see what is here and then make a plan for the empty spaces. I still have a few trays of transplants ready to go, and it's gonna rain tomorrow, so I'm gonna do a whole bunch of direct seeding. So we're gonna call this a mid-season garden edit, if you will. It's hard to see the empty spaces here, but I have at least a full row and a half that still need planting. And we are running out of time to get most of these things planted. We are down to somewhere between 75 and 100 more frost-free days, hopefully 100. That's been the case the last few years. But by the time we get to 70, 75 days, our day lengths are much shorter and things are going to be growing slower anyway. It's important to take that into consideration. This broccolini is one of the first things I planted here a good month before our last frost, and we've been getting a good harvest off of these twice a week. But these ones are getting just a little bit too old. Here's a good example of when you want to harvest these. This is all that it grows to, just this small little thing, but it's great because they grow so fast, the cabbage worms don't really get to them. I haven't had to net or spray or do anything, and we haven't been finding any caterpillars in these, so that's great. This row is full of these fluffy self-seeded poppies. I grew these a few years ago. I just love them. They look gorgeous when they're opening, and the fresh buds are just so fluffy. They fade pretty quick, but then they leave these really interesting looking seed pods, and that's what I want out of these. I'm gonna dry these seed pods before they burst open and get seeds everywhere, but I'll probably scatter a few, because if I hadn't done that a few years ago, I wouldn't have these. Now this was the row I direct seeded. We've got lots of dill and cilantro, which are starting to go to seed, but I'm gonna leave them. Hidden in there are all my green onions. I'm sure a few are going to be sacrificed because they're being crowded out by these poppies, but that's okay. And the beets, there are, I think, Cylindra, a long red variety, and then golden beets. The deer keep getting the foliage of these, and in some cases just pulled them out of the ground and left them there. So lucky that I check on this every day and we were able to use those beets because they just ate the foliage. I suspect a rabbit has been eating my last two lettuce plants, and I've been creating a marigold hedge across the front. So these are giant African marigolds. I put two in the front of each bed. Some of them I lost. There's one here, one on the next two rows, but then you can see all along. I'm hoping this will create a bit of a hedge within another month and a half or so. So the first two rows were a bit of a mix of things. Mostly direct seeded and some flowers. This is onions. These were just planted from sets. They look like they're starting to bulb up pretty good. And this is about a week and a half since I weeded this row, so I'm gonna have to come back through here and do that again. There's a little bit of carrots that I seeded back here. I've been finding that the deer have been pulling these out of the ground too. Not a lot, luckily. And this is where I had peas, which were looking fantastic until the deer found those too. So I think I'm going to put some baby pumpkins to grow up this. Now we've got some empty space back here too. There's about 8 feet behind these tomatillos, which are looking fantastic, by the way. And there are some little babies. There we go, some little baby tomatillos. These are large green tomatillos. They'll get about this big. And we'll know they're ready because those husks will burst and you will be able to see the fruit. We make a tomatillo salsa that is just fantastic. We didn't do it last year and I really missed it. Some little self-seeded treasures. We have some cress, which I do use as bouquet filler, so I am happy to have that. And a lovely little snapdragon, which I don't remember planting this variety. Regardless, I'm happy it's there. And there is an awful lot of bupleurum growing in between my tomatoes. So there's one. And there's a few here. Now these are my Brandywine tomatoes. I have 1, 2, 4 of them. They're probably 4 feet tall, and there is my bupleurum. A little taller than the tomatoes, and they haven't quite opened up yet. It's hard to distinguish between the two on camera. There's a bupleurum, and there's one, and there's a few on the other side too. So the Brandywine tomato is what you call a potato leaf tomato plant. There's the leaf of the Brandywine, which is a big beefsteak tomato. And then here is a regular leaf style, and this row is all paste tomatoes. So the first 4 are Amish paste. They're about a foot taller than the cages at the moment. The next ones are Roma. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Roma. A Mayan Indian, which I ran out of cages. So the last 2 have a cage. The Mayan Indian does not. And what are the last 2? I feel like I just found 2 more Romas, and that's what's right there at the end. So that is, I think, the most tomato plants I've ever grown. I would love to grow a few more. We don't really have the space. These lovely little, I think they may be winged amobium. I grew these here last year and they self-seeded, which is great because I didn't grow them only because I ran out of space and I decided they were the least important, but I am really glad they're here. Now the pepper plants, I have a row of, I don't know, I think 15 pepper plants in here, and unfortunately the deer got those too. So they came through and they basically pinched my plants for me, but they are very slowly recovering. I think I'm going to give them a feed today because it's going to rain tomorrow, help wash all that in. But they got the first 10 at least. I have a few more pots that were in the greenhouse. I don't know if I'm going to replace them because the roots are definitely well established on these ones right now. So if I don't find space for those, I'll probably just give them away. There's another amobium. I think that's another amobium, which I've left. All of these poor pepper plants which have been topped. I don't even know if I'll get peppers from them at this point. But then we have 1, 2, 3 in between all this amobium. 4, 5. Those ones are looking a little bit sad. Back few feet of these rows always do look a tiny bit sad because they get way less sun. The sun sets in, that's a noisy crow, in this direction. So starting around 1:32, the shade starts to move across this garden, and it's probably about 5 o'clock before it's completely in the shade. But this gets sun from first thing in the morning, about 6 a.m. And then this row here is completely empty. It's about 24 feet that I have to fill. We have some cucumbers, some squash, some mini baby jack pumpkins, I think orange and white mixed, and some yellow beans. So I think what I'm gonna do is, these are only about a week and a half old too. Beans grow so fast. I think I'm gonna put these beans in the back half of the tomato row. Did I show you eggplants? I have 4 eggplants back there. Why did I plant eggplants? I never use them. Should I rip them out and plant something else? I might. We'll see. I'm going to put these beans over here. In another week, I won't be able to get between those tomatoes. These, speaking of tomatoes, these are the best tomato cages I've ever found. And I've never found them again. They're much taller than a regular tomato, and you can actually take one of those small tomato cages and fit it upside down over the top, and then it's about this big. I do that for my cucumbers. Now I've run out of small tomato cages, but I think I may plant cucumbers on this again. So, cucumbers can suffer in the heat, so I'm going to plant some back here where it gets a little more afternoon shade. So let's put, wait, do I not have regular cucumbers? I forgot to plant regular cucumbers. All right, I have 12 pickling cucumbers. That's fine. I have some butternut squash, delicata squash, butternut, buttercup, and some zucchini. Okay, let's do the pickling cucumbers first. Now these should have been planted a month ago. They're very root bound. They'll be fine. Once they get their roots in the soil, they'll catch up. Okay. I have a bad habit of sticking my little hand planter knife in a bed somewhere and leaving it there, and I can't find it. So this is a little overkill, but we're going to use this instead. First thing up, pickling cucumbers. I'm putting 1 plant at each foot, and I'm going to have to clip these here for support to make sure that they start growing up, but once they start growing up and clinging to these, they should be able to take care of themselves. Okay, so I have enough for 3 of these, and most of these plants, you can tell they're not as dark green as they should be, but most of them have 2 plants in them, which is great. That means we have 4, 8, 12. Some of them just have 1, but somewhere between 20 and 24 of these pickling cucumbers. And I like to grow a lot of these so that we get a bunch of fruit all at once, so that I can make a good amount of pickles over the course of about 2 weeks. So that's a good start. Okay, I think we have a plan. I sat down with a cup of coffee and did some thinking, because I always think better with coffee. And what we're going to do is start with the dwarf tomato, the 7 pepper plants, and then the 3 zucchini right there in front of all those pickling cucumbers. And then I'm going to put 4 of the baby Jack mix mini pumpkins on this 4th red trellis. Now, I found these clips on Amazon. Can't remember how many came in a bag, but it was a lot. This is the smaller size. I have larger ones that I've used on my tomatoes, and I use them on my sweet peas too. They're really great. I'm going to use those to hook up these pickling cucumbers. And when these pumpkin plants get a little bigger, I'll do the same. I'll probably bring half of them up the trellis and let the other half cover the ground. Now, the advantage to growing things up trellis is you can grow a lot more in a smaller space, and it cuts down on possible diseases and things getting eaten by insects or even squirrels. But then the advantage to letting things cover the ground is it cuts down on weeds and watering. It's really good at keeping the soil temperature down a bit if you live in a really hot climate, keeps weed seeds from germinating. Any that do germinate will grow a lot smaller. So if you can't quite decide which method you want to use, you can do a little bit of both. That is 1 row that is completely done. And with the wet weather coming, they should establish and start growing away really quickly. Next thing I'm going to do is put the last 3 zucchini in over in the back of that row over there, and then I think I'm going to put some butternut squash here in between all of these peppers. That way, if they don't recover and give me any peppers, at least I'll make use of that space. Now, I do have a reason that I'm putting squash and zucchini and things like that everywhere, and that is because that I noticed I have a giant pumpkin patch over behind the greenhouse, and that has not been touched by anything. And somebody told me the other day that deer don't like to walk through vining crops. Now, I don't know 100% if that's true, but if it does, I don't mind stuffing my vegetable garden full of vines just to keep them out. If that works, that would be an awfully easy solution to keeping deer out of my garden. So, okay. And now my green beans are going to go right here. I'm going to do a double row of beans. Now, these germinated and grew near the door of the greenhouse, but it really doesn't take much for them to get really floppy. There we go. Beans are done. I'll get those squash planted in front of the peppers next. Just 3, I think. I'm going to have a lot left over, but I'll put a few more, I think, in between some of the tomatillo plants, and then we'll see what we have left. That's it. That's all my squash. And that's good because I think I'm running out of room. Oh no, my pumpkins. Almost forgot about that tray of pumpkins. How many have I planted? 8? Okay. Where do I have room left? We filled that. The basil's going to go in front of the tomatoes. Oh, that trellis that had peas on it. Perfect. Okay, we have 20. I'm going to have to put something stronger here. I'm not going to do that today. But these are nice and secure. I do have some longer, I found some more bamboo poles a few weeks ago. They're in the shed. I'll get these planted for today, and I will deal with this another time. Where's my shovel? Okay, there we go. This is an organic-based pelleted fertilizer that's just made out of chicken manure. I've had pretty good results with that so far. There's a lovely dill plant here. I'm going to try not to disturb that. Dill self-seeds so easily, which is good. It's also easy to pull out where you don't want it because it doesn't have very big root system. This time in the year, I don't mess around with planting. I want to get these things in the ground as fast as possible because I also have a really big flower harvest to do today. These are the Baby Jack mix, so they are small red and white pumpkins about this big around. So I would definitely not put regular sized pumpkins this close together, and this may be borderline too close even for these. So if I can get half of these to grow up the trellis, half of them to cover the ground, that should be perfect. I am so pleased. I have filled every possible space and used almost everything that I had in the greenhouse that desperately needed planting. Yay! So next, oh yes, basil. Then we'll do a little direct seeding, which should be fast. Basil and tomatoes are always really good companions. They go very well together in the kitchen as well as the garden. They enjoy similar growing conditions, which means good water, good feed, good rich soil, of course. Soil isn't the best, but it's not terrible. Judging by these tomatoes, they seem to be pretty happy. I don't have a ton of basil because this is old seed, but I have some Thai basil that we're going to put here. See, I have 5 plants, so I'm going to put 2 of them here. I'd like to put some here, but I don't know how big those marigolds are going to get. Probably very. So I think I'm going to put the other 3 right here. That is a scene of success right there. I'm going to do beets over here. These are Boldor. Oh, these are the golden beets. These are also old seed. So I'm going to direct seed them pretty heavily. I did not pickle any beets last year, so I'm really hoping we get enough to be able to do that this year. Let's do the cilantro right here. It's that lovely little snapdragon. And my official disclaimer is to label where you plant seeds. I have forgotten my labels in the house and my marker, and I have this video to look back on too, so I'm going to take the risk and not do that. General rule for direct seeding is to bury seeds about twice the depth of the size of the seed. So cilantro and beet seeds are both a good size, so they definitely need to be covered, but not too much. I really need to thin these tomato stems. That's going to be for a different day. Now these beets are going to be harvested within the next 2 weeks, so I think I'm just going to sprinkle some green onion around them. Should work pretty well. And then I'm going to abandon the radishes because it is still a little on the hot side, so they probably won't do very well. Radishes grow so fast, I'm just going to wait for cooler weather. So these are Tokyo long white bunching onions, and that is the same variety that I have planted right there amongst all of the poppies. So I'm just broadcasting these kind of everywhere to fill in space. And then hopefully it doesn't rain too hard, because the risk here is that a really heavy rain could wash all these seeds. I might find them all growing down there or not at all. And that actually happened this time last year. We got a freak storm that turned into 11 inches. And the forecast said 20 millimeters. So for those of you who use inches, that's 20 millimeters is about an inch. So I'm going to go cut flowers now. And I don't think I'm going to film that today because I'm a bit pressed for time. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.